Hey everybody, I'm MxG, and welcome to week 196 and video episode number 22 of 4T, the Thursday Throwback Track. Every week I take a release from my collection, I discuss it, I give you my take on it, I throw in whatever I want, and talk about how it has influenced my music. This week, the 12-inch single from the men, the myths, Beasties, and She's On It, B-side, Slow and Low. Love this cover. I'm going to talk about this thing here a little bit later on too. This podcast will not do justice to the Beastie Boys or to my love for the Beastie Boys. I don't know that any particular podcast or upcoming documentary or book from a year or two ago could. Certainly this release can't. I don't know that any single release of theirs could, but definitely this cannot. But it's a jumping off point for me to talk about one of my favorite bands. This band, if you want to know more about them, like I said, read the book, Beastie Boys Book, that's what it's called. See the podcast, see the documentary that's coming out tomorrow, Spike Jonze, or anything else. Just go and find out and read it. I'll give you a little bit of history if I so choose, but I'm not going to flesh it out here because that's not what this is about. And if you don't know them by now, then I suggest taking some time to learn about them. But I will say this. They are top 10 for me, and not in a revolving, these 50 bands are sometimes in my top 10 kind of way. They're hard, like in-place top 10. I don't know which number, but they're there. And there are so many reasons for that. I'm going to be looking at my notes to read you some of those reasons. One, let's be honest, they kicked it off right when I was the age to appreciate them. License to Ill came out when I was in high school in my teens, so I was, bound to fall in love with them, having already listened to a lot of hip-hop for maybe 5 years before that, 5-6 years before that. Second thing, they were funny from the get-go. They took their music seriously, always did, even before their first album came out, and straight up until the end. But they never quite took themselves that seriously. I'm sure they did, here and there, but in terms of their public persona especially, they didn't. So they injected an irreverence to things. How could you be reverent about the music and still be irreverent? I love that. I try to capture that most of the time in the live shows I do on Facebook and hopefully elsewhere one day again. Third thing is they're from NYC. They're from New York. And I was in love with New York since before I even knew I was in love with New York. I moved here in 2000. I've been here a long time. Not from here originally, though. But the more I look back, the more I see the things that I loved, the music, the TV shows, the movies. So many of them were set in New York or were about New York. It's crazy to me, actually, that I didn't see it before. That's why it made so much sense for me to move here. They represent New York. To the Five Boroughs, great album. That's probably their most New York representative album. Number 4, they showed me and the rest of the world that otherwise totally uncool white boys could rap if they wanted to, and it didn't matter what your voice sounded like. Make it your real voice. Do what you do. Make the lyrics real. They were crazy in the beginning and did some lyrics that were purposefully riffing on, certain cliches and things like that. But really, even from the beginning and certainly later on, they made their lyrics their own. They talked about what they wanted to, and they weaved, the lines the way they wanted to. Eminem certainly checks them as an influence, and why wouldn't he? And along with that, they took hip-hop to places that it had not been before. Rick Rubin was a big part of that in the beginning, but they had a history as a punk band before they were a hip-hop band. So they had that, DNA in them already. And yet at the same time, they still respected its roots. They still respected the people who pioneered it. In fact, that they toured with Run-d.m.c. and they were friends with Run-d.m.c. I know they worked with Rick Rubin too, Run-d.m.c. So that was part of the reason. But they really respected each other. Hey, this is the action-packed section. I'm going to do this more than once probably because it's a 12-inch. There's only one song on each side in this case. But I will keep talking. Number 6. Why do I love them so much? Because they evolved. They evolved musically. They evolved professionally. In terms of their business, they started their own label. They started their own zine or whatever you want to do. They did videos and stuff. And they evolved personally, certainly. Let me give you just a second to hear the beginning of this. That dingy thing, man. but you can't beat the bass. Can't beat the bass. At 7, they mixed it up. They were never content to stick to just the typical boom bap. Even when they did that, they added other things to it. I mean, go straight to Paul's Boutique. That's a perfect example, and it was their second album. What a second album to come out with, really, after what they did in the first album. They could have gone anywhere, and they went to the place they wanted to go musically. I have so much respect for that. And they continue to do that throughout their careers. They wove things into their sound that they wanted to, whatever sparked them. And you can tell that, number 8, they loved music of all kinds. The book tells you a lot about that, but they loved it, they respected it, they revered it, and yet could still take the piss out of it and twist it around. And again, take the core love and elements of music, seriously, while still ripping it apart and being irreverent about it. This is in an artistic sense, in a craftsmanship sense. When you read that book, you see the lists of music that they listened to and how incredibly eclectic it was and is. And number 9, I mean, put all that together. They're never quite what you thought they were or are. And I mean, those are just some of the main reasons why I've loved them. And of course, one of the big reasons why they were that way. I mean, all 3 of them contributed equally, but was of course Out of Out. And he's one of those dudes. Still hard for me to believe that he's dead. Like Prince, like Bowie, like Cobain, like John Lennon. The world doesn't seem right without them in it. There's something that just doesn't click in the brain to think that this person's no longer there anymore. And yeah, I mean, I wish, Harvitz and Diamond would still do new music. I hope that they are doing things just for their own pleasure. I'd love to hear anything they release. I'm sure they'd want to call it something different band-wise. But I completely 1,000% respect and understand why they wouldn't want to do music at this point and why it would take them so long to even possibly consider doing anything new. Losing a brother like that, essentially. And for that reason, it hurts. They're one of the bands who've been around since, almost my entire, coming of age life, let's say. And, like bands like, U2 and Matthew Sweet, no matter how long it takes for them to put out something new or how popular or unpopular it is, I always look forward to it. And to not be able to look forward to more Beasties music, it's been a tough one, So what's so special about this particular 12-inch? Not that much other than it's a Beasties, thing, but there are 3 things I can mention. First of all, it's the only thing of theirs I have on vinyl. I grew up at a time when vinyl and cassette and CDs coexisted, and they weren't quite equal, but you could get almost everything on any of those formats. It was pretty freaking awesome. At times you could even get things on an 8-track. Look it up. And after this, I shifted to CD pretty quickly. So, and I'm going to talk about that in another podcast as far as difference between CD and vinyl and cassette and all that crap. You got to stay tuned for that. Pause while I continue to talk and flip it again. You're going to hear the same 2 songs over and over until this podcast is over. Second, these songs were not their most popular songs. In fact, they were released, as it says, in 1985, this 12-inch, but it didn't hit. They weren't successful. Other songs from License to Ill were way more successful, as you may know, Fight for Your Right to Party, etc., etc. But what happened was these were re-released 2 years later in 1987 and became big hits in the UK and elsewhere. So that's pretty cool. It showed that songs like this could land in a slightly different way in other places. And that the more eclectic stuff, I mean, this is probably not super, eclectic, but the side B for sure, maybe the U.S. wasn't quite ready for. I don't know. Which further, in terms of this very long second point, is that this side, A, actually this is a completely different point. This is third point. Side A has that kind of Fight for Your Right, Rick Rubin, rock, rap, feel, heavy metal, and rap. Side B has the guitar, but it sounds more like those things are samples. They may have actually played them, but they're treated like samples. They're cut and paste over an 808. And you put those two things together, it kind of harkens back to the past where the 808 was so huge in hip-hop, but also kind of looks forward to Paul's Boutique with that kind of cut and paste style. So that's kind of interesting. And fourth and not least, not this song, but the Slow and Low was actually written by Run-d.m.c. So it was a collaboration. And they did other collaborations, certainly, later. Ill Communication, I love that album, and the collaborations on that are freaking awesome. I think it's probably my favorite album of theirs. Sorry, Paul's Boutique, love you too, but no. But this was maybe one of their first official collaborations. When this 12-inch first came out, right after the first album came out, as I said, it was seminal, for me and people my age, and I'm sure people younger and older. My brother, Dave, and my DJ partner and friend, Mike, got together and learned all the lyrics to some of those songs from License to Ill, and used the instrumental 12-inch, which I don't have, I think Mike probably has, and rapped over the instrumentals at the dances at the high school we used to DJ. So this stuff, we just absorbed it. I was ad rock, by the way. Yeah, I was. I don't know. I was younger then. My voice was higher. My brother was MCA, and Mike S was Mike D. My friend Mike S was Mike D. But so, I can feel, and you can feel, you can hear in a lot of what I do the DNA of this music. In particular, the song that I chose to include here in the text, a song called I Took One For Me. It's a very recent hip-hop song of mine, but you can hear how there's elements of rock. I choose the voices I want to sing and rap in, and don't feel confined by any conventions of either yesterday or today. There's so many reasons why this is a good example of these dudes influencing me. Like I said, this isn't going to do justice to the Beasties or to my love for them, but it gives you kind of a flavor of why they're so important to me and honestly to the world and to music in general. If you get a chance, read the text below. This adheres a little bit more closely to the text, so it's going to be easy reading. Click the links. I put a link on for this, give you a little information on it. I put a link on, of course, for my song I Took One For Me. Please click on it. Please listen to it. Listen to it 3 times. You'll get a good sense of what it's like. Once never does anything justice, frankly, no matter who it's from. And share. Please subscribe. You'll know when I put out new, videos of all kinds. Subscribe to this. Go to facebook.com/nick.dimatteo so that you'll know when I put out live shows. I'm doing still 3 shows a week, and I'm going to continue that for as long as possible. And while you're doing all that, think of questions you want to ask me or comments you have. Do you have any history with the Beasties? Love them or hate them? Do you have any history with any kind of hip-hop from any era? I'd love to hear about it. I want to know more what you think. And if you've listened, what you think of that too, of my songs, of the songs that I talk about, because as always, my objective with sharing this music, that being number 1, is conversation and connection. Thank you again for watching and listening and reading and clicking and sharing and subscribing, and I will see you next week.